few months ago, when we were preaching through the 9 arts in our core, we reached this topic of the art of sharing. My wife Anne invited people to tell in a couple of minutes the story of what life was like before Jesus and how it was different now. As 3 or 4 did so, an amazing thing was going on. Some of the new people who'd begun attending were really encouraged and astounded that those people who they thought had got it all together had experienced some of the same issues as they had, and were sometimes still going through them, but they knew that Jesus was making a real difference to how they were able to cope and live through the situations that they faced day by day. A number of those newer attendees came back to us and commented on what a difference it had made to them as they listened to these real stories from real people that they were beginning to get to know. They recognised the impact that Jesus had and has in the lives of those who trust him. And it was a further step in causing them to think about what that might mean for them in their lives and situations. None of the people who told their stories was someone who would be known as an evangelist, but each of them had something to say after they'd stopped and given some thought to it. We were able to encourage them afterwards that what they had to say really made a difference even in that gathering, never mind the difference that it might have if they were to go on and share with somebody outside of the 4 walls of a church building. People, on the whole, love stories. We all want to be captivated, and we see what a great storyteller Jesus was in his many and varied parables. Us learning to tell our stories well will help make them captivating to those who want to hear our stories from us, because we each have a story worth telling, every one of us. Peter wrote in his first letter, "In your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect." As we get to know people who believe differently to us better through using the arts of spiritual conversations that we've already explored, they're likely going to be curious about us and our motivations in life. That gives us opportunities to gently and respectfully tell our story and appropriately share what Peter called the reason for the hope that you have. If we want the best for people, if we're convinced that knowing Jesus will give them not just assurance for eternity, but the most fulfilling life right here and now, if we deeply care for them, then we'll want them to share a relationship with Jesus also, and we'll want to share our faith effectively. Our motives in this are crucial. In conversation with one of our volunteers a good while back, Anne was asked, "Do you love me because you want me to be a Christian? Or do you want me to be a Christian because you love me?" That was a really important question for her and has led to multiple discussions with other believers and not yet believers around the topic of why we share our stories and God's story and what we hope to achieve through the sharing of them and our pointing others to Jesus. If we're truly in love with Jesus ourselves and have experienced his grace and truth in our lives, then I hope our motivations include the fact that we are compelled by our love for these others to offer them the best thing that we have. We know that Jesus has met our deepest need and can meet theirs, and we're convinced that God is worth knowing and that relationship with him brings what nothing else can to everyone who enters into it. It's our greatest treasure, and we want others to share it. That's why we're telling our story. 4 simple guidelines for telling our story are: be brief, be clear, use ordinary everyday language, and be humble. Keeping it as simple as possible really helps. Remember that in telling your story, you're attempting to answer these 3 simple questions. What were you like before knowing Jesus? How did you end up placing your trust in Jesus? And what are you like now after becoming a follower of Christ? Try to find one word or phrase that easily identifies who you were before you either met Jesus or fully trusted him, and another that describes who you are now that you have a relationship with him. That keeps it simple for you both and opens the way to questions from the person you're sharing with. The next thing, of course, is to be able to share God's story simply. And we've put some classic examples for you to go and check out in the notes below this video. We need to know the essence of the Christian message and how to share that simply. remembering always that we're in a dialogue and not just presenting a monologue. That sensitivity we've already developed through practicing the other arts of spiritual conversations will be helpful with this one as well. And be ready not just to share God's story, but to help someone receive him if they choose to respond positively at the time we're sharing. As always, the great thing is that we're not in this alone. God is both ahead of us and with us, working out his purposes in the lives of all those he loves and longs to be in relationship with him, including you and the person you're sharing with. May you be blessed to see him at work bringing others into the kingdom as you share your and his story with others. So here are some questions and practices as usual. What's the biggest obstacle for you when sharing God's story? Why do you think people are afraid to tell their personal stories about becoming a Christ follower? And then some practice. Get together this week with someone who'll role play with you and explain God's story of redemption as you would to a non-Christian. Also, practice sharing your personal faith story with a friend in under 2 minutes and ask for feedback and how it was received. God bless.